Minister to move second reading, or Prime Minister to move second reading.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I beg to move that the bill be read a second time, and that we come together as a new Parliament to break the deadlock and finally to get Brexit done. Now is the moment, as we leave the European Union, to reunite our country and allow the warmth and natural affection that we all share for our European neighbours to find renewed expression in one great new national project of building a deep, special and democratically accountable partnership with those nations we are proud to call our closest friends. Because this bill and this juncture in our national story, Mr. Speaker, must not be seen as a victory for one party over another or one faction over another. This is the time when we move on and discard the old labels of leave and remain. In fact, the very words seem tired to me as I speak, as defunct as big enders and little enders, or Montagues and Capulets at the end of the play. Now is the time to act together as one reinvigorated nation, one united kingdom, filled with renewed confidence in our national destiny and determined at last to take advantage of the opportunities that now lie before us. And the whole purpose of our withdrawal agreement is to set this in motion and avoid any further delay. And in the hope that the honourable gentleman does not wish to have any further delay, I give way to him.
Referral to the Prime Minister for giving way. The bill contains provisions not to extend the transition phase or phase 2 of Brexit. It does not endanger strengthening the hand of the European Union in those negotiations. Why has he boxed himself into a corner?
On the contrary, Mr. Speaker, I think most people looking at the negotiation would agree that it strengthens our negotiating position. Because if we have learned anything from the experience of the last 3 years, it is that drift and dither means more acrimony and anguish, Mr. Speaker, and there will be nothing more dangerous for the new future that we want to build than allowing the permanent possibility of extending, I think I'm coming to the point that honourable members wish to discuss, extending the implementation period in a torture we all remember that came to resemble Lucy snatching away Charlie Brown's football, or Prometheus chained to the Tartarian crag, his liver pecked out by an eagle and then growing back, as honourable members on all sides of the House will recall, and then growing back only to be pecked out again in the cycle repeated forever. This bill learns the emphatic lesson of the last Parliament, unlike members opposite, and rejects any further delay. It ensures that we depart from the EU on the 31st of January, and at that point Brexit will be done. It will be over. The sorry story of the last 3.5 years will be at an end, and we will be able to move forward, Mr. Speaker, together. The bill ensures that the implementation period must end on the 31st of December next year with no possibility of an extension. And it paves the way for a new agreement on our future relationship with our European neighbours based on an ambitious free trade agreement, with no alignment on EU rules, but instead control of our own laws. And close and friendly relations, Mr. Speaker. This vision of the United Kingdom's independence, a vision that inspires so many, is now, if this Parliament, this new Parliament allows, only hours from our grasp. The oven is on, so to speak. It is set at gas mask 4. We can have it done by lunchtime or late lunch. And the New Deal that I negotiated with our European friends will restore our great institutions to their rightful place as the supreme instruments of British self-governance. Once again, this House will be the only assembly able to legislate for this United Kingdom. British courts will be the sole arbiters of those laws, and above them all, the sovereign British people, masters of their own fate, controlling their own borders, laws, money and trade. And throughout our new immigration system, we will not only welcome those with talent, but go out of our way to attract people of ability regardless of nationality or background. And we are only able to do this because the freedoms offered by European Union partners, the freedoms offered by leaving the EU, allow us once again to control overall numbers and bear down on unskilled immigration with our new points-based system. And if the Honourable Lady, if she's against our new the control of immigration, I'd like to hear her explain why.
The Prime Minister has spoken about welcoming people to these islands. Clause 37 of the Prime Minister's bill removes the government's existing obligations with regard to unaccompanied children seeking asylum in the European Union who want to join their family members in the United Kingdom. Lord Dobbs has described this removal of a right as mean-spirited and nasty. Can the government tell me, or can the Prime Minister tell me, why he is making this mean-spirited and nasty move?
I'm afraid the Honourable Lady has totally misunderstood or possibly misrepresented the purpose of what we are doing here. We remain proud of our work in receiving unaccompanied children. We'll continue to support fully the purpose and spirit of the Dobbs Amendment, but this is not the place in this bill to do so. The government remains absolutely committed to doing so. And amongst the many other advantages of this deal, Mr. Speaker, is of course that we will be able to sign free trade deals with the booming markets of the world, a power that no British government has enjoyed for the last 46 years. We will cast off the common agricultural policy that has too often frustrated and overburdened our farmers. We will release our fishermen from the tangled drift nets of arcane quota systems, and on the fishing, I give way to my right honourable friend on the point of fishing.
Most grateful, my wrong friend. I offer my heartiest congratulations. There will be no communities more keen to get control back than fishing communities. Yeah. Will he guarantee that we will not make the mistake of the 1970s? We will not allow allocation of fishing resources to be a bargaining chip in the treaty negotiations. We will become like a normal, independent maritime nation and conduct negotiations on an annual basis for reciprocal deals to mutual advantage.
Well, my right honourable friend perfectly understands what we need to do to restore to this country the advantages of its spectacular marine wealth, and that is exactly what we will do once we become an independent coastal state. And I remind the House, and I remind members opposite, that there is, of course, one party in this House of Commons that is committed not just to reversing the will of the people, but to handing back control of Scotland's outstanding marine wealth to Brussels. The SNP. That's what they would do, and I look forward to hearing them explain why they continue to support this abject policy and abject surrender. This House also, under this bill, regains the authority to set the highest possible standards, and we will take advantage of these new freedoms to legislate in parallel on the environment, on workers and consumers' rights. And I reject the inexplicable fear. And I'm going to give way to the last time, because I think that the Honourable Lady maybe want to talk about this inexplicable fear. I give way with pleasure.
I'm grateful to the Prime Minister, and he is right that he has won a mandate to get Brexit done. But what he has not earned is the right to shoehorn into this legislation measures that are a direct attack on some of the most vulnerable children in the world. If he thinks that people in towns like mine who believe that we deliver Brexit want to see us turn our back on decency and tolerance and kindness and warmth and empathy, he is wrong. Will he take these measures about child refugees out of this bill?
I may say, I understand where the Honourable Lady is coming from, but I like the Honourable Lady who speaks for the Scottish Nationalists. She is wrong on this point. We remain absolutely committed to ensuring that we continue in this country to receive unaccompanied children, as we have done, and we've led Europe. We've received thousands already. This country has a proud record, and we will continue to do so. And I thought she was going to say that this House would be unable to legislate or regulate on the environment in a way superior to the European Union, but that is what we will now be able to do. And I reject the idea that our proceedings must be somehow overseen and invigilated by the EU and measured against their benchmarks. The very essence of the opportunity of Brexit is that we will no longer outsource these decisions. With renewed national self-confidence, we will take them ourselves and answer to those who sent us here. It was this Parliament in this country that led the whole of Europe and the world in passing the Factory Acts, the Clean Air Acts of the 19th century, which improved industrial working conditions by law. And this House should never doubt its ability to pioneer standards for the fourth industrial revolution, just as we did the first. And that epoch-making transformation, as with all the pivotal achievements of British history, reflected the combined national genius of every corner of this United Kingdom. In this new era, our success once again will be achieved as one nation. This new deal in this bill ensures that the United Kingdom will leave the EU whole and entire, with an unwavering dedication to Northern Ireland's place in our union. And on that point, I, of course, happily give way to the Right Honourable Gentleman.
Very grateful, Mr. Speaker, to the Prime Minister. I'd almost thought we'd fallen out, but I am pleased that he took the intervention. The Prime Minister knows that he has the strength from this election to deliver Brexit. He also knows that we want to deliver Brexit. But we want to deliver Brexit as one nation. And I'm glad that that terminology and that phraseology is being re-injected into this debate. But he needs to understand the concerns about the customs arrangements for Northern Ireland, tariff differentials, the potential for checks, and he needs to understand the concerns we share because we want to ensure we leave as one nation. And we're not going to resolve those issues today, but will the Prime Minister commit to proper and thorough and detailed reconsideration, using the strength he has to deliver for the entirety of this country?
Of course, Mr. Speaker, I understand the point that the Honourable Gentleman raises, but let me remind him that the deal commits to unfettered access between all parts of the UK. It respects the territorial integrity of the UK and ensures that Northern Ireland is part of the UK customs territory and would therefore benefit immediately from any of our new free trade deals as soon as they are in force. And let me just remind the House, Mr. Speaker, that the special provisions applying to Northern Ireland, which ensure, after all, a very important thing, that there is no hard border across the between Ireland and Northern Ireland, are subject to the consent of the Northern Ireland Assembly. And unless the Assembly specifically withholds its consent, unless indeed the Assembly insists on continuing with this approach, then those arrangements automatically lapse into full alignment with the rest of the UK. And I believe that these arrangements serve the interests of Northern Ireland and the UK as a whole. And it is a great deal for our whole country. And we must now begin building our future relationship with the EU. Our aim is to provide a close friendship between sovereign equals, to promote our common interests, inspired by pride in our European heritage and civilization. And Clause 3 of the Political Declaration invokes that spirit, establishing, and I quote, the parameters of an ambitious, broad, deep and flexible partnership, rooted in our shared history and ideals, and standing together against threats to rights and values from without or within. I'm absolutely determined that this great project will not be the project of one government or one party, but of the British nation as a whole. So Parliament, as I have said, will be kept fully informed about the progress of these negotiations. And we should be fortified by a renewed sense of confidence that while our democratic... I think I've given way quite a few times, Mr. Speaker. Come on. I mean, all and the policy of the Liberal Democrats is now to have another referendum. They've abandoned revoke. They now want another referendum. So I think when they work their policy out, I'll give way. We should be fortified. We should be fortified by a renewed sense of confidence that while our democratic institutions have been tested as never before, if this House comes together now to support this bill, as I hope it will, history will record that the first act of this new Parliament in its earliest days was to break the ice floes and find a new way through, a new passage through to unsuspected oceans of opportunity. And so now is the moment to come together and write a new and exciting chapter in our national story, to forge a new partnership with our European friends, to stand tall in the world, to begin the healing for which the whole people of this country yearn. And it is in that spirit of unity that I commend this bill to the House.
The question is that the bill now be read a second time. Leader of the Opposition, the Right Honourable Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Over the last 3.5 years, the government's mishandling of Brexit has delivered nothing but political gridlock, chaos and economic uncertainty. It's paralysed our political system, divided communities and nations, and become a national embarrassment on an unprecedented scale. We recognise the clear message from the British public last week, however they voted in the referendum of 2016, and understand their determination to end the never-ending cycle of the Brexit debate and get back to solving the day-to-day issues that challenge them in their daily lives. So we must listen and understand that we cannot go on forever debating what happened in 2016, and we have to respect that decision and move on. However, Mr. Speaker, understanding all this doesn't mean that we as a party and a movement should abandon our basic principles or ever give up the demand for a fairer and more just society. We warned before the general election the Prime Minister's Brexit deal was a terrible deal for our country, and we still believe it's a terrible deal today. I'll give way later on. It will not protect or strengthen our rights, or support our manufacturing industry, or our vital trading relationships, or protect our natural world in a time of unprecedented climate crisis. Neither will it address the deep inequality in our system or secure the interests of every nation and region in the United Kingdom. Instead, under the Conservatives, this deal will be used as a battering ram to drive us down the path of yet more deregulation and towards a toxic deal with Donald Trump, and that will sell out our National Health Service and push up the price of medicines to benefit US drug corporations. It will take us away from the essential principles we believe in, of a country that looks after everybody and protects those communities left behind by the excesses of the free market. This deal does not bring certainty for communities or for business or the workforce. In fact, Mr. Speaker, it does the opposite and hardwires the risk of a no-deal Brexit next year. I'm sure that will delight many members on the benches opposite, but not those who suffer the consequences in communities and workplaces all across the country. That is why Labour will not support this bill. As we remain certain there is a better and fairer way for this country to leave the European Union. One which would not risk ripping our communities apart, selling out our public services, or sacrificing hundreds of thousands of jobs in the process. This deal is a roadmap for the reckless direction in which the government and our Prime Minister are determined to take our country. They have done their utmost to hide the likely impact and continue to use gimmicks and slogans to turn attention away from their real intentions.
For the right honourable gentleman, but surely the people have voted in a general election and supported the Prime Minister's deal. As a Democrat, surely he should heed the people.
I'm disappointed in the honourable member. He clearly... But in the spirit of Christmas, I wish him well. He hasn't been listening to what I've said. Mr. Speaker, on the questions And nothing exposes this government's intentions more clearly than the steps they've already taken on workers' rights. For all the promises over the past few weeks that they are the party to protect rights at work, at the very first opportunity, they've removed the basic provisions they said would be part of this bill. That does not bode well for the separate bill the Prime Minister is now saying he will bring forward on workers' rights. If he wants to assure people that their rights are safe in his hands, he should commit to legislate to ensure workers' rights in Britain will never fall behind the European Union standards in the future, and support amendments to enshrine this commitment within this bill. Yes.
I thank the Leader of the Opposition for giving way. We are all concerned in this House with workers' rights. And indeed on the rights of those who are approaching retirement. He put his policy to the British people, in as much as anyone could discern it, in a general election. He was slaughtered. What bit of that message does he not understand?
The Prime Minister, your leader, if I may say so, Mr. Speaker, said the workers' rights were going to be protected. They are not in this bill. So, Mr. Speaker,
I'm grateful to my right honourable friend for giving way. Isn't the whole point of this that this withdrawal agreement seems to be diminishing every time? The previous Prime Minister, the right honourable member for Maidenhead still, this is worse than that. The one that we had before the election, there's things that have vanished. It's not only workers' rights that are being downgraded here, it's parliamentarians' rights, because the ability of the legislature to scrutinise the executive has been taken away here. It's bad for democracy.
Thank my friend for the intervention. She's absolutely correct on what she says. And then, Mr. Speaker, I now move on to what I think is one of the most appalling sections of this bill and what the Prime Minister has presented to us this morning. I want to make it clear that I see the government's removal of the protections in this bill for unaccompanied children seeking asylum as nothing short of an absolute disgrace and a piece of dishonesty towards those people who at the moment are clearly very, very concerned. Throughout the last Parliament and for his whole life, and I was talking to him last night, my good friend Lord Dubs has worked tirelessly to ensure children affected by the worst aspects of global injustice can be given sanctuary in this country. Now, this government, in its first week in office, has ripped up those very hard-won commitments. This is a move the director of the charity Safe Passage has described, and I quote, as truly shocking, saying it could have, and I quote again, potentially tragic consequences. I simply say this, Mr. Speaker, coming up to Christmas, shame on this government for abandoning children in this way. Mr. Speaker, on the environment and food safety standards, this deal points to a complete realignment towards the far weaker protections and standards that operate in the United States. If this government is set on pursuing a trade deal with the United States, with President Trump, with precious few bargaining chips to hand, the brutal reality is that Britain will have to lower its standards. That is the brutal reality of it. The European Union has made it clear that a future trade deal with the European Union will depend on maintaining a level playing field on standards and protections. So the choice we now face is between keeping the highest environmental and food standards in order to get a future trade deal with the European Union, or slashing food standards to match those of the United States, where there are so-called acceptable levels of rat hairs in paprika, maggots in orange juice. It's true. If members think this is a piece of imagination on my part. When I was first told this, I also thought that cannot be the case. I checked out, and it absolutely is. We are about to strike a new race to the bottom in a deal with the United States, and I think everyone should be aware and warned of that. Mr. Speaker, turning to the arrangements with Northern Ireland, the Prime Minister has emphatically claimed, and I quote his own words, there will be no checks between Northern Ireland and GB. And that, again I quote, we have a deal that keeps the whole of the UK together as we come out of the EU. These claims are simply not true. We know from the analysis carried out by his own Treasury that under his deal there will be, in fact, an abundance of checks and customs declarations in the Irish Sea. Not only will this have a huge impact on Northern Ireland businesses and society, it will also have implications for the rest of Britain's economy and manufacturing industry. The Treasury's own analysis spells it out. The more the government diverges from the EU trading regulations in the future, the more checks and disruptions will be put in place between Britain and our biggest trading partner. More checks, more disruption is deeply damaging to our trade and for our manufacturing sector, threatens taking a wrecking ball to our vital supply chains and the hundreds of thousands of jobs that rely on them. Car manufacturers, chemical industry, all those that rely on just-in-time supply chains will feel a devastating impact from all this. This makes it even more incredible that since agreeing its deal, the government has yet to produce one single bit of evidence or analysis to show it will have a positive impact on the economy or our communities in any way. I say to all members, new and old, that it is our job in Parliament to question, to scrutinise and to hold the government to account day to day. If we believe the government is taking the wrong approach, we should never be afraid to oppose. And when it comes to our future relationship with the European Union and the rest of the world, we cannot let this government act in an undemocratic and secretive way.
On that point,
trade deals with the EU and the United States, or anybody else for that matter, must be done transparently. This country is about, Mr. Speaker, to embark on a major change of direction. As we leave a 40-year economic partnership for an unknown future under the terms of the withdrawal deal, we need, Mr. Speaker, an approach that puts jobs and living standards first and builds the strongest cooperation with our European neighbours, based on openness, solidarity and internationalism. And that, Mr. Speaker, is the approach that will bring an end to the Brexit crisis and bring our country together.
Go to Liam Fox.
They don't cheer a one.
Yeah.